Hey, Herb, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Good morning, Brian. Hey, thanks for having me. Herb Clan. I live and work in Charlotte, North Carolina. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, PA. I studied finance at Penn State. Moved out to Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2010 to start working for GE Healthcare.
Yeah.
I was there up through the spring of this past year. I switched from GE Healthcare to Cisco Systems, where I'm currently an account manager here in North Carolina.
So how do you go from a finance major to a sales guy?
Yeah,
What happened?
it was a long, winding road, and it wasn't something that happened overnight. It was
Yeah.
kind of throughout the course of 5-6 years. I joined GE Healthcare through their financial management program. It's a 2-year rotational program. You get to join different teams within the finance function. Spent time in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Salt Lake City, Utah, Chicago, Illinois. After that, I went up to GE Corporate to join their corporate audit staff. And that's a global program where you travel all over the world. Every 4 months, you're rappelling into a different GE business, aviation, treasury, power and water. And you're either doing a financial audit or an operational, streamline project. And, some of the feedback I used to get on the audit staff was, Herb, you're too much of a sales guy.
Really?
When it comes to, explaining a financial adjustment to a CFO, we need you to say yes, no, or a number. Don't tell the story. You're too much of a sales guy. Back on my FMP days, I had done enough work behind the scenes with the commercial team. I'd seen kind of some of the commission checks and was always fascinated with those who carried a bag. And in 2015, when I was rolling off the audit staff and it was time to take a job in a GE business, I wanted to go back to the healthcare business, but I wanted to jump into sales. And it took about 6 months interviewing for different roles. Finally found a couple of guys that believed in me, were willing to give me a shot. And here I am 7 years later.
And what was the friends and family reaction to that? Because, finance is not an easy major. It's one of the harder ones.
Correct. Yeah. I think my family was probably less surprised that I was trying to switch into sales than they were when I told them I was declaring finance as my focus of study. When it comes to, being personable, trying to, create relationships, build relationships. Like I said, tell the story. I think my family, saw it to be a good fit and were very supportive and encouraging.
That's it, because finance is kind of like the brainiac side of business, kind of the unemotional, I would say introverted even.
Yeah, for sure.
And it attracts that type of person who likes some solid things, known things, no fluff.
Yeah, no one wants the funny guy at the end of the table managing
Their
the
money.
P&L. Yeah. No, that's usually not very, very popular. But, the thing that my time in finance really gave me is a process mindset.
Yeah.
Especially on the audit staff, like most of the the top performers I was working with, they actually had an engineering background.
Yeah.
And understanding a wing-to-wing process, the inputs, the outputs, either validating that everything's correct or, something's not right and what that implication downstream is. It's the same thing in sales, going from point A to point B, walking someone from current state to future state and, why my solution? Why now?
Well, that's it, because a lot of people look at sales as a personality characteristic instead of a process.
Right.
And whether you call a process a game or some structured way of a journey from where you are to where you want to get.
It is. Yeah. In today's commercial world, journey is probably like, sometimes overused, almost
Way overused, right?
just like a buzzword. But, when you're on a journey, you're on it with multiple people. And that's the thing about managing the sales process is, understanding the customer. And when you say customer, who do you mean? Often it's 5, 10. I mean, you can have a dozen different
People.
customers
Yeah.
on one project. And so understanding how each of them fit, like whenever I was doing my financial audits, we'd usually get a data dump on a Friday. We grind through the weekend, and if you found something, there was a step by step kind of best practice we used, where Monday morning you're clearing it with the financial analyst that may or may not have made that error, right? And you basically go to them with your finding and say, hey, look, either later this afternoon, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be sitting down and meeting with your boss. I want to bring this to you first, get your feedback. I can incorporate, any and all adjustments into this. And then after you kind of clear it, you move up the organization to the finance manager, to the finance director, eventually the controller. And then on Thursdays was the big, CFO presentation. And what's the first thing the CFO asks you when you walk in with $1 million adjustment to the income statement at the end of the quarter? What does my
Right.
team think?
Yeah.
And so you already have the team's buy-in. There's no surprises, and you walk out of that internal boardroom and you walk into the external customer boardroom, if you will, and it's the same thing. You got to clear it up the organization. You got to make sure that everyone understands what you're proposing, how it impacts them, what they can gain from it. And then that support kind of builds a little bit of a groundswell. There's no surprises. Everyone feels involved. Everyone feels included. And that's usually where, I've been able to kind of find success.
Cool. And what was it like the first couple years in sales? Did you feel at home or was it a struggle? Were you a fish out of water?
I had a good team around me. So as baffling as it was at first, I was surrounded by some pretty seasoned vets that were willing to, hey, Herb, 6, 12 months, 18 months, like you're going to be lost. I got you. It will click. It will make sense. And when it did, then I kind of enjoyed the benefit of like the exponential curve, just because I had that solid base, beneath me.
And what about it surprised you?
Um, Probably how when it comes to B2B transactions and you're dealing in, $1 million numbers, the people that are making these decisions have probably never made $1 million decision in their life prior to that, especially outside of work.
Yeah.
Most people, the biggest thing they've ever bought is, a car or a truck or a boat, right? Whether you're selling a $1 million, MRI, or, in my career now, $1 million, cybersecurity solution, like that is a lot. And so it surprised me that the decision makers were often trying to navigate their buying process the same way they would, like I said, like, a personal asset like a car. And
And
it's much more complicated than that. And so it surprised me that a lot of my time was spent educating them on how to buy versus me selling. I don't really have to do a ton of selling as much as I do, on the kind of educational side of buying.
and was it mostly emotional obstacles as opposed to logical obstacles, them getting comfortable with this new product and the risk and the change of spending that kind of money?
Yeah. Yeah, that the emotional obstacles are always there. I I like to always, put a stake in the ground around something objective, whether it's a financial outcome, an operational outcome, a clinical or say like a technical outcome. Like putting words on paper, putting numbers on paper. Often I will, you know, learn my customers' mission statement, their vision, if they have like a 5-year strategic growth plan, and then often try to marry my proposal up to that. Because once you have those linkages and you give that to your customer, they then can almost use that as their own justification as to why they're doing it. And it feels less risky because when your solution ties into the broader task that they are charged with carrying out, they almost then have the ability to go sell for you. You kind of leave that one page executive summary behind, the document that can sell when you're not there.
And what things did you learn that most people still don't get? Because you came up in the, I think, a great situation, high dollar amount, lot of mentors, people that could help you along.
For sure.
But given your background, what surprised you about sales?
Um, you know, I like the saying, if you can't teach it, you don't know it.
Yeah.
And the biggest surprise was the lack of financial acumen of the commercial sales team. Not because they can't learn it, it's just no one's ever taught it to them. And like I saw time and time again where, I'd kind of be in the passenger seat, like Rogers behind Favre. And, the customer says, well, we don't have money for that right now. And, my colleague would be like, oh, okay, well, we'll check back in 6 months. And they, and it's like, well, hold on. If you could just help me understand, when you say you don't have money for that right now, when you say money, what do you mean? Oh, well, we don't have the funding. Right. So when it comes to a capital, expenditure acquisition, is there some sort of like systemic process? Oh yeah, we have this, enterprise resource planning systems, ERP system that we have to get our projects, signed off on and the budget, and we can't execute until they're funded. Well, right. So when we're talking about doing this deal, would your ERP system be able to issue a purchase order against a project that is budgeted but not funded? And they're like, well, yeah, I don't see why not. And suddenly it's a completely different conversation. You're talking about budgeting versus funding versus invoicing. So many salespeople even use like orders and revenue and cash collection, like, these words interchangeably. And understanding like whenever you're sitting down in front of, an end user, they're really not, concerned with any of the, say the three big financial statements. Once you get up to that director level, they got something tied into running their portion of the P&L, right? And you eventually get to the point where someone cares about the balance sheet. In today's world, subscription is kind of where it's at. CapEx versus OpEx. Everyone wants to be the Netflix of whatever it is they do.
Yeah.
But a lot of organizations are still behind when it comes to accounting for that. How do you subscribe to a $5 million enterprise networking infrastructure? Like that used to be a one-time CapEx purchase. We know how to depreciate that. We got an army of accountants that are really good at it. We got a whole cube farm upstairs. It's a completely different mindset.
Well, that's it. And early in my career, the CFO occasionally would get involved. Our CFO would get involved in these large deals. And they were well into the seven figures, and we would try and get a leasing company involved so that they could lease the equipment over the lifetime of the program so that they wouldn't have to make it capital equipment. And just these simple little financial vocabulary
right
made the deal so much easier to get done. But
right.
you knew that from your finance background, right? That's
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I found it to be extremely important to kind of clarify that stuff early and upfront. It's really good to say, hey, I'm sure, we're all speaking the same language, but just to ensure that I understand, we're all singing from the same sheet of music, right? Like the capital acquisition request, like that can be executed on today. You lock in the pricing. You don't have to worry about the lead times. You set your own shipment date, and we will ship when you're ready in your fiscal year in which the project is budgeted and funded, so on and so forth. It's important to lay that out ahead of time because you give your customers and sometimes your teammates the opportunity to kind of learn in that moment without having to say, yeah, I don't know that, but I probably should, because you want to keep them in that creative mode. The last thing you want to do is put someone in a defensive position where they feel less than, they feel silly. The meeting's over at that point. So I always try to keep people in that creative space where they feel empowered, they feel educated. Like I'm on their team, I'm trying to help them because at the end of the day, that's why we're there.
And other than the financial expertise, what selling skill do you feel is your strongest?
Um, it's probably not a super um, popular answer, but it's PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard it.
Yeah, it's PowerPoint. That's my Superman skill. I can take a very, very complex concept
Yeah.
and boil it down into a one page, easy to read, digestible format, that kind of lays out what's the WIFM, what's in it for me. Like I said earlier, tying back those objective stakes to financial outcomes, operational outcomes, technical outcomes, next steps clearly outlined. Because once I have that, it's almost like my ticket to the boardroom, right? That's literally the piece of paper, the ticket that I'm walking into these meetings with as I'm working through the organization, getting everyone on board. And by the time that page hits the CEO's desk, everyone's already seen it. They know the story. It's clear as day. And again, that document can be there when I'm not to kind of sell on my behalf.
Yep.
I can control the messaging, make sure that, none of these key points get lost. And so that's what I do.
Cool. And what was the transition like from GE to Cisco? Because different market, different products,
Mhm.
different challenges.
Yeah. Well, to maybe start with your last point there, as far as challenges go, when I was, at GE Healthcare, I was running the imaging business in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you go from one hospital to the next hospital to an imaging center to an imaging center. You basically pick up on, okay, this is kind of the trend of issues I see, and this is the solution of my portfolio. So I can, match them up, marry them up, move forward. Coming over to Cisco, I have their top 10 accounts in Charlotte, all outside of the healthcare industry. So I'm having to learn these different business models, from manufacturing to entertainment, automotive, fashion, hedge fund. I even have a chicken factory, chicken farm in my
Well,
in my list.
they need their internet as well, don't they?
They need networking too. But at GE, you're always mindful of the fleet, the fleet of cath labs, the fleet of CT scanners. So it is like an ongoing working relationship. But the biggest difference I've seen so far, being in the seat for 100 days between GE and Cisco, is, Cisco is the network. They are the IT infrastructure, not just routers, switches, wireless access points, but all that information. Where's it stored? Into the data centers, on-prem, in the cloud. And then last, but certainly not least, most importantly, is the security aspect of it. How safe is your network? We also have like the collaboration portfolio, and in today's world, hybrid work from home, interconnection. I mean, look at us now, right? So the relationships with the customers at Cisco seem to be a lot deeper because the Cisco team has to be there every day. I mean, literally on call 24/7,
Yeah.
so that if something is happening, we can keep it alive, we can keep it up. It is a living, breathing thing versus, when you're in the CapEx equipment world.
And what new skills did you have to develop?
It's probably learning to be even more comfortable, being very uncomfortable. As an account manager, it's your job to, pull in the experts when you need to. We got specialists for a reason. At Thanksgiving dinner, my family's like, "What is it you do?" I'm like, "I put the right people in front of the right people at the right time." Um, at Cisco, I'm having to do that a lot more often
Right.
because it's one, like, you can memorize, certain texts and specs of equipment, but when it comes to very customizable, cloud solutions, you get questions from customers. I mean, you couldn't even guess. You can never anticipate. And so, having to have those architects, those super specialists at the ready and pull them in and, kind of let them go, that's been a transition and something that frankly I've been growing to enjoy.
And did the financial skills transfer well? Did
Uh, yeah, probably even more so, just due to Cisco's, kind of go to market business model when it comes to software subscriptions, shifting from capex to opex, licensing agreements, enterprise agreements, so on and so forth. Like being able to talk about moving funds from, the one-time capex purchase, over a lease, like you said, throughout the course of a loan or, just a subscription-based model, being able to sit down and have that conversation, in a comfortable kind of regular manner that's transferred pretty well.
and what skill, if you had now, would take your career to the next level? Let's say I offered you a vitamin, and and in it, if you took it for 30 days, you'd have that skill. What would that skill be?
That is a very good question. Um, I don't know.
No, no
I
weaknesses. No, wish I could.
I I wish I could. I wish I could have maybe a little bit more of an executive presence earlier in the sales process. I never try to start at the top of the organization.
You know,
I always try to, kind of, knock on the front door and work my way up.
yeah,
Sometimes, you run into obstacles along the way and you kind of get blocked and the elevator's not working and you're not going to get any higher. When you do make it to the top, when you do make it into the C suite, that's often an easier sell than it is, at the lower levels of the org because their time is limited. They're looking for the value points right up front. And if you have a clear, compelling argument that is an outcome based solution tied into their strategic priorities and initiatives anyway, and the numbers make sense, it usually moves pretty quickly. So that's something that I am working on. Just that that confidence, maybe that strategy to not feel like I need to go top or excuse me, bottom to top, every time, but rather start somewhere in the middle and see if you can, hit that trampoline up and just move things along a bit faster.
yeah. Certainly for the last 20 years, I think that the idea that an executive will mandate a product because a salesperson told them about it without that support from the user base, that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Other than like in sales, right? Where, like the Salesforce has no business selling to salespeople. They sell to the sales leader. The salespeople don't care. It's
Right.
the sales manager that cares. But in IT, if the implementers, the engineers say, that's not the right fit, there's no CIO that's going to say, no, make it the right fit. Those
Correct.
days are over
Right. Right.
because it's just too much to know. And that's why they hire the people.
It's also very important to go wide in the organization, especially when it comes to IT. Anytime a company, buys something from Cisco Systems, that it gets added to the IT team's to-do list,
Yeah.
right? And if it's already a mile long and you're just tacking on to it, that can be exhausting. But getting into the different functions, whether it be, marketing or operations or engineering, and kind of, tethering your solution to a strategic initiative in one of those areas. It's often when you can kind of see it moved up the priority list, and then you help your network engineers understand, why it is, that important and why it should be prioritized.
Is that your chief kind of obstacle, the priority list? Because that's typically what I hear in security and IT is that they like it, they want it, they can afford it, but you're number 17 instead of
Right.
number 2. So we'll get to you in 2 years?
Yeah, the prioritization of the projects, that is an obstacle. I would also say breaking the status quo when it comes to going from on-prem to cloud. When it comes to breaking out from some of the traditional networking to some of the more advanced solutions that often come through startups and acquisitions by Cisco. Driving that adoption is
Yeah.
something that we're working on every day.
And yeah, given it's Charlotte, are most clients laggards where they're kind of holding on to the on-prem, or technology is not their core business? It's kind of what they run their business on, but their real business is chickens.
my my customer base, they seem to be very forward
They
thinking.
are. Okay.
Yeah. Outside of New York City, Charlotte is, the biggest US financial hub, again,
Yep.
second to New York. And I think that kind of innovation, that technology, that's kind of an energy that's here in Charlotte. Even a logistics company that I serve, they have partnerships with MIT around machine learning
Okay.
and artificial intelligence for their trucking fleet. Um, an automotive dealership, they're all about the user experience and mobile devices and meeting their customers where they're at. The day of, the phone call going to the kitchen about your service appointment 3 weeks, from now, that's now fully automated on, the communication platform as a service, via text. Hey, do you need an Uber home while we service your vehicle? And then the automated notification, hey, can we call you an Uber to bring it back to pick it up?
Yeah. And what is it about sales that is true that most reps don't get yet?
Again, I think I would go back to simplifying the complex.
Yeah. That's our job,
If,
right?
if you can't teach it, you probably don't know it. And if you don't know it, your customer certainly doesn't know it. And if they don't know it, they feel stupid. If they feel stupid, they get defensive and you're done. So if you take an educational approach, take the time, take the time to practice with your friends, with your family, pretend like the next meeting you're going to is Thanksgiving dinner and you have to explain how this all works. Rarely have I ever had a customer say, Herb, you're making this too easy, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
people want to understand. And when you put them in that position of empowerment, where suddenly they may become more of the expert on this project than their boss, that's whenever people get excited and the adoption actually goes through.
And what do you use? Metaphors, PowerPoint, stories? What's your superpower there?
It's the PowerPoint and it's metaphors, probably, analogies
Analogies.
sometimes
Yeah.
to a fault. Again, you got to go back to the what the customer knows. I already mentioned, buying a vehicle, for example.
Yes.
So when you're going through the different options, in your portfolio, I'll often say, hey, what do you drive? Oh, I have a truck. I drive a Ford. Okay, so this is a Maverick. This is a Ranger. Here's your F-150. I'll sell you the Raptor. That's kind of too much. That's kind of too much. If you're pulling your boat, we're going to go Ranger, F-150. Now it's just a matter of prioritization. And you see the light go off, it clicks. So metaphors and analogies often go a long, long way.
And where did that creativity come from? Because that's kind of orthogonal to finance.
Yeah. Well, prior to studying finance at Penn State, I studied a lot of German history and film. I was always very interested in the arts. Big fan of music. Growing up, that was kind of a big part of my upbringing. There's always Fleetwood Mac, Elton John, Pink Floyd on in the house. I came up through the period of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I always really enjoyed music. Like I said, enjoyed the arts, enjoyed film. It was kind of always a passion of mine. Um,
Did
when
you play an instrument, or were you a practitioner of any of these? No?
nothing worth writing home about.
Well,
Um,
You don't have to be good at it, but the practice of any performance art is very similar to sales.
Yeah. No, I played the French horn and the guitar growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Blackbird's not easy, but when you get it down, it's a cool party trick.
Well, you also learned. Did you have an instructor?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that coach, right? Practice, repetition, little tiny improvements, finding those little distinctions.
Accountability.
Yeah. Sounds like
Accountability.
sales, right?
Ralph Goldinger at May's Music Shop, he used to play the Disney cruises. So he'd be gone for a month, and he'd give me the list. Here's the songs from the Killers that I want you to learn how to play.
Yeah.
And when Ralph gets back home 30 days later, Herbie better have practiced. Driving that accountability, that was instilled very young.
And what's your why behind all this? What's the motivation?
I like people. I like spending time with people, getting to know people, helping people. I have a great family. I have a great friend base. And you got to have a career of some sort. You got to get up
You
and
got to make money, right?
you got to do something every day. And I mean, trust me, like the money in finance and accounting and auditing, it's great.
Yeah.
But you're in the cubicle and you're at the water cooler, and
It's a grind.
it's a grind. And I wasn't feeling like I was shaking as many hands as I wanted to shake. I was having as many productive meetings as I wanted to have. And when you leave the office and you get in the company car and you're putting 50,000 miles on a year, you're meeting people.
Yeah.
You're meeting people, and that gets some people going, and it struck a nerve with me. And I like life on the road is good.
Cool. Hey, Herb, really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
LinkedIn would be great. Herb Clan. Ryan, it was great to connect with you. Again, longtime fan of the show. I love the clips. Sometimes they hit a little too close to home, and I got to check myself. But you keep us honest, and I appreciate everything you do.